Alright guys, welcome back. So today we're going to be looking at a node called timers. But first what we're going to do is actually make a new actor. So what we're going to do is go to our blueprint folder, and we're going to right click, blueprint class, actor, and then we're going to call this something sensible. So I'll just do mine as bp underscore kill orb for blueprint kill orb. And then what we'll do, we'll go ahead and open that. Mine opened up in another tab, so I'm just going to bring that over here. Now, what we're going to do is make this something sensible. So we're going to add a static mesh, just so we can actually see something visual. So you can either do a static mesh or I want a sphere. So I'll go ahead and just do a sphere here. And then if we want, we can go ahead and change the material as well. I'm just going to change this to a green. Now, with this, it now gives us the ability to start putting some functionality in here. Now, you may remember that in the past we've told you to do various things like using delays, where you put an event happen, you make it do something, let's say an applied damage. You put it through in here, make it apply some damage, and then it delays for like 0.2 seconds, and then it loops back around and does that. However, this isn't a very good process because what happens when we're doing this is once we fire this, there's nothing we can do to actually control this. Because all this does is when we fire the event, it applies damage, it delays it for so long, and then it loops. And then this is what's called an infinite loop, and it's not something that we like in games design. So instead, we want a bit more control over this. So that's where timers come in, because timers give us some really cool bits of functionality that we can do. So if we right click and search for a timer, timer by event, it gives us this node, set timer by event. And it gives us some pretty cool things we can do. So, first of all, we have the event which delegates it. So, essentially, what this does is it gives us the event we can trigger. And if we hover over each of these, it gives us a bit more information. So, if I was to drag off this and do a custom event, this is now what fires the event. So, fire damage event. Next, we have the time. So, this is how long it takes for this to fire. So, for now, we'll go ahead and just put 1 second. Looping, this tells us exactly if we want this to be a thing that repeats itself. So after each 1 second, it fires again and again. So for now, we'll go ahead and tick that. Now, sometimes with these events, they can fire for multiple frames. So all we want to do is if we want to try and limit that, so as you can see here for looping timers, whether to execute only once when the timer would otherwise expires multiple times in the current frame. So this basically just makes sure that it only fires once per frame. Most of the time, we don't really need to click this, but sometimes you may find that you want to trigger that if you're doing something fancy. Next, we also have the initial delay. So if you want this to actually have a small delay before it actually starts firing this, as well as we also have the initial start delay variant. So if you want to add a bit of variation within your timers, this is where you can do that as well. So it feels a little bit more dynamic rather than a static value. And then this is where a lot of the real functionality comes in and control, is this return value. If I hover over it, you'll see it says a timer handle structure. The timer handle to pass to other time functions to manipulate this timer. This is exactly what we want. We want to be able to manipulate this timer so we can control it from other places. So one thing that we can do for this is if we right click on it and promote to variable and call it something sensible like damage timer handle. This now gives us a variable of a timer handle that we can now utilize elsewhere within our blueprint to have a bit more control functionality over this. So if I do this one as a trigger damage loop and link this up, so this is how we're going to start this timer to go off. And then if I bring this applied damage down here, do this. And obviously, if we're going to be doing this with actual functionality, we'd want to be putting other values through here. So for now, all we'll do is a print string, which is just saying damage, just so we know that this is triggering. And we'll do this for every 0.5 seconds, just so we can see that firing off. Now, this is perfect good. We have the functionality here and it's ready, but we're going to be using the timer handle. So to actually utilize that, what we want to do is make another event. So we'll do another custom event, and we'll call this one the stop damage loop. So when we trigger this event, we want to actually manipulate this damage timer handle. So if we drag this in and get it, and if we drag off this pin and we want to search for a clear and a validate by handle. And what this does, it says, okay, so this here is the handle for this timer. So we're sending a message to this timer and saying, clear what you're doing now and validate it. So it basically stops at what it's doing and forgets about it. So it can stop these looping actions, or let's say if you had a countdown, for example, like a clock that's counting down before the room explodes, you can say, okay, clear and validate that. So you have now stopped the timer and that functionality stops. So there's a lot of good, useful things that you can utilize for this, and it's really powerful. You can use this for some really cool stuff. So that's great. That's amazing. So for the most part, we're done. So if we fire this in here, drop it down, and we click play, let's see what happens. Nothing. Now, give you a moment there to think, but the reason for that is simply because of the fact that we are not actually triggering these events. We're not actually telling these events to fire. So, what we'll do, we'll go back over to our viewport and we'll add something to trigger. So, for now, we'll just go ahead and do a sphere collision. We're probably all aware of these right now, but we'll go ahead and add one anyway. Make a sphere collision, name it something sensible. We'll go ahead and increase the size just so we can actually interact with this. And then compile and save. So it just gives us something simple to actually trigger these. And then if we come back to the event graph and then right click on the sphere collision, go to add events, and then we can do an event begin overlap. And then if we go back again, add an event, end overlap. Now, this will just give us some basic ways that we can start to trigger this. Obviously, when you guys are making your own, I expect you guys to actually develop this further and make this more unique and interesting. But for the end overlap, we want to actually stop this damage loop. So we'll go ahead and do that. And I'll even borrow this print string from here, just so we can see that this is stopping. Follow the screen. And then we'll also go ahead for the begin overlap, and we'll do the trigger damage loop. So now when we enter the sphere, it's going to go ahead and start the damage loop with the timer, and I set our handle, which then will fire this every 1 second. So damage, 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 until we eventually leave, which is going to trigger the on end overlap. And that's going to clear and validate our handle and print the string just to say it stopped. So if we compile, save, and go back and start play, and we'll see this in action. So you should hopefully see this in the top left. Come into here, we see damage, 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 and that's going to keep going until we back off, and then it says stop. So damage, 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 and then stop. That's exactly what we're looking for. And that's the basics of timers. Again, it's super straightforward. It's a lot of power within these. There's a lot of different ways you can use timers, and I really look forward to seeing how you guys utilize them. So, from now on, you guys should be using timers for the most part when you're using these events. Try and not use delays, as they are, for the most part, very much a debugging tool, but there are some cases that you may want to use them. But for the most part, timers is the way to go. Very powerful tool. Alright, guys. Hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next one. Goodbye for now.